The November wind howled around the corners of the penthouse restaurant, a lonely, distinctly New York sound, 70 stories above the glittering grid of Manhattan. Inside Ethelgard, however, there was no sound at all. The air itself seemed to be made of spun gold and silence, thick with the scent of old money and the electric tang of a deal about to be sealed. At the center of the vast private dining room, Sheikh Tariq Al-Hamad, a man whose quiet words could shift global markets, held a pen, a sleek, black Mont Blanc tipped in platinum, poised over a contract worth $200 million. This was more than money, it was redemption. The contract would secure the Petraean Sunstone, a legendary artifact that would legitimize his family's ancestral claim to the mineral-rich Al-Rimal Al-Baida territories, a claim contested for decades. His team, lawyers from 3 countries, geologists, and a renowned historian, had spent a year vetting the deal. The wire transfer was primed. The world was holding its breath. But the only person in the room who knew the devastating truth wasn't on the payroll. She was the ghost gliding between the table and the service cart, the invisible girl refilling their glasses with Fiji water. Her name was Amelia Vance, and at 28, she was an expert in the art of being overlooked. Her life was about to shatter the gilded silence with 5 words in a language no one in this room, save one, would ever expect her to know. The cold that seeped into Amelia's bones on her commute from Queens was a different kind of cold than the sterile, climate-controlled chill of Ethelgard. Her world was one of cracked linoleum, past due notices tucked behind a magnet on her fridge, and the lingering scent of antiseptic from the hospice where her mother had spent her final year. Here the carpets were so plush they felt like walking on packed snow, and the cutlery gleamed with a warmth that mocked the city outside. Amelia was a phantom in a crisp black uniform and a starched white apron. Her mousy brown hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it was a constant, dull headache, a familiar ache in a life defined by them. Her eyes, a shade of hazel that absorbed light without reflecting it, were masters of avoiding contact. She could clear a plate, top off a wine glass, and vanish before a diner even registered her presence. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Dubois, considered her his most reliable asset. "You, Vance," he'd said during the morning briefing, his voice a low hiss. "Our wallpaper. Good wallpaper. The best. The penthouse tonight. Sheikh Al-Hamad. You do not exist. You anticipate. You serve. You disappear. Got it." "Yes, Mr. Dubois," she had murmured, her gaze fixed on a microscopic lint particle on his lapel. "This isn't a dinner, Vance. It's history, or at least very expensive business. Security is ex-Mossad, ex-Delta. Don't breathe too loud." She had simply nodded. Sheikh Tariq Al-Hamad. Even in her hermetically sealed world of debt and grief, the name resonated. He wasn't one of the flashy, supercar-driving princes who populated the tabloids. He was a titan, a recluse from Abu Dhabi who controlled one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. His true passion, the financial papers whispered, was not oil or stocks, but history, specifically the lost history of his Nabatean ancestors. At 6:55 p.m., Amelia stood outside the service entrance to the penthouse, her hands steady as a man with a jawline like a weapon, and a wire in his ear scanned her with a security wand. "Clear," the man whose name tag identified him as David grunted. "Briefed?" Amelia nodded. "Good. Eyes down, mouth shut. They won't even know you're here." He pushed open the door. The room was less a dining suite and more a palace in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panorama of New York City's diamond-dusted skyline. A long, polished mahogany table was set for 6. At 7:02 p.m., the Sheikh and his entourage arrived. Tariq Al-Hamad was in his late 50s, leaner and more intense than his photographs suggested. He wore a dark, exquisitely tailored Brioni suit, and his eyes, deep-set and intelligent, seemed to catalog everything in the room, including, for a fleeting, unnerving second, Amelia herself. With him were his lead counsel, a sharp New Yorker named Ben Carter, and an older scholarly man, Dr. Rashid, the Sheikh's personal historian. 5 minutes later, the sellers made their entrance, and the atmosphere shifted. Marcus Thorne was first. He was the human embodiment of a hostile takeover, tall, impeccably dressed, with a smile full of perfectly capped teeth that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. "Your Excellency," he boomed, his voice a symphony of feigned deference and raw ambition. "An honor, a truly historic moment." Behind him was his expert, Dr. Alistair Finch. Finch was in his 60s with a mane of silver hair, a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, and the unmistakable air of academic superiority. He was a tenured professor of Near Eastern studies at a prestigious university, a name that carried immense weight. He carried a reinforced, climate-controlled Pelican case as if it contained the Holy Grail itself. Amelia moved with the practiced invisibility of a wraith. She poured the water, still as the Sheikh's rider specified. She presented the amuse-bouche, a single oyster with a pearl of caviar. Her hands did not tremble, but inside her stomach was a knot of ice. Because Amelia Vance wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of the late Dr. Robert Vance, a name that, in the world of archaeology and Semitic languages, was now spoken only in cautionary whispers. Robert Vance had been the world's leading authority on Nabatean Aramaic inscriptions, a genius who could trace the provenance of a potsherd by the faintest impression of a potter's thumb. Amelia hadn't grown up with fairy tales. She'd grown up with the scent of ancient dust and the cadence of dead languages. Her father's bedtime stories were about the spice caravans of Petra and the lost city of Hegra. Her mother, a gentle Jordanian woman named Samira, would sing her lullabies in the soft Arabic of her village. Their life had been a sun-drenched idyll of digs and discoveries until her father's last project, the discovery of a tomb that was later declared a hoax by a rival. The scandal had shattered him. Then came his illness, then her mother's, and now this. Amelia, who held a master's degree from the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, was drowning in over $150,000 of medical debt. The academic world, wary of the Vance name and offering little more than poverty-level stipends, had shut its doors to her. So she had vanished into the one place no one from her old life would ever look for her. "Shall we proceed?" Marcus Thorne asked, rubbing his hands together with ill-concealed glee. Dr. Finch placed the Pelican case on the table with theatrical reverence. The 4 heavy latches clicked open, each one a punctuation mark in the silent room. He lifted the lid. There, nestled on a bed of royal blue velvet, was the Petraean sunstone. It wasn't a gemstone. It was a tablet of deep red sandstone, no larger than a dinner plate, covered in the elegant, angular script of Nabatean Aramaic. In its center was a carved solar disk, inlaid with a single, breathtaking piece of lapis lazuli. "Your Excellency," Dr. Finch began, his voice resonating with professorial authority, "the sunstone of King Aretas IV, dated, as we have established, to 9 BC, the ceremonial tablet confirming the Alhamid lineage, and by extension, the sovereign rights to the Sheikh leaned forward, his gaze locked on the artifact. His own historian, Dr. Rashid, donned a pair of white cotton gloves and picked up a jeweler's loupe, his breath held tight in his chest. Amelia, standing by the service cart preparing the traditional mint tea, risked a glance. The script. It was beautiful, a masterclass in the formal Nabatean used for royal decrees. It was a script she knew as well as English, a script her father had taught her to write before she could even spell her own name. And as her eyes scanned the familiar letters, a tiny, sharp splinter of ice lodged itself in her heart. Something was wrong. She snapped her gaze away, focusing on the ritual of pouring the boiling water over the fresh mint leaves. It was nothing. Just the ghost of her father, the echo of his passion. She was just a waitress. She was just wallpaper. "The provenance, as you can see from the dossier, is ironclad," Dr. Finch was saying, using a small laser pointer to highlight a section of the tablet. Amelia, trapped by protocol she couldn't leave until the presentation was over, was forced to listen to a lecture she could have given herself. "We acquired it from a private Swiss collection," Marcus Thorne interjected smoothly. "A family whose patriarch was a, shall we say, diplomat in the Levant during the 1920s. It was in a rather sorry state. Dr. Finch has personally overseen the last 2 years of its conservation and authentication. Finch gave a curt nod. The sandstone has been dated via thermoluminescence by the Max Planck Institute in Germany. The results are unequivocal. It was last fired between 50 BC and 20 AD, a perfect window for the reign of Aretas IV. The Sheikh's lawyer, Ben Carter, made a note. Dating confirmed, Your Excellency. The tool markings, Finch continued, are consistent with first-century Nabatean carving techniques. We did a microscopic analysis. No traces of modern steel, no telltale signs of electric carving tools. It's all handwork, done with copper and early iron chisels. Dr. Rashid, the Sheikh's expert, was still hunched over the stone, his brow furrowed in concentration. He murmured in Arabic, "The royal seal of Aretas. I have only seen it in manuscript drawings. It is perfect." "Indeed, Dr. Rashid," Finch said, a smug little smile playing on his lips. "The seal authenticates the tablet, and the tablet authenticates the seal, a perfect hermeneutic circle." Amelia felt that splinter of ice twist in her gut. A perfect circle. Her father's voice, weary and defeated after his own scandal, echoed in her memory. "Amy, my love, never trust perfection. Perfection is the forger's tell." The ancient world was messy, human. A real scribe gets tired. His chisel slips. A real potter leaves a fingerprint. The lie has to be perfect, because the liar is terrified of being discovered. The truth always has a smudge on its nose. She tried to push the thought away. This was not her fight. This was not her world. Thorne gestured grandly. This tablet ends the century-long dispute over the Al-Rimal al-Baida. It is an undeniable sovereign claim. The 200 million is not a price for a rock, Your Excellency. It is a key to a kingdom. The air was thick with the scent of history and the much heavier scent of commerce. "Dr. Finch," the Sheikh finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the authority of a thunderclap. "The inscription, the language itself. You are absolutely certain?" This was it. The question Amelia was screaming in her own mind. "Completely," Finch said, without a moment's hesitation. "It is a textbook example of formal Nabatean Aramaic of the period. Note the characteristic ligatures, the form of the letter shin. It is flawless. I would stake my entire career on its authenticity. Flawless, perfect, textbook." The words pounded in Amelia's head like a funeral drum. She was refilling Dr. Rashid's water glass, her movements slow and silent, bringing her closer to the table. Close enough to see properly. Her eyes devoured the inscription, not reading the words at first, but feeling their rhythm, their flow, their soul. And then she saw it. It wasn't a single glaring error. It was a dozen tiny perfect imperfections. The letters were too uniform. Her father had taught her that every scribe had a hand, a unique pressure and angle. This looked printed, as if a machine had carved it, each letter a perfect replica of the next. It lacked the subtle, human tremor of a hand at work. Her eyes scanned the content, her mind, a precision instrument honed by a lifetime of study, kicking into high gear. She was a ghost, standing just behind Marcus Thorne as he shared a triumphant smirk with his lawyer. She read a line about tribute, another about the gods, and then she saw the word. A single word in a sentence describing the inlaid solar disk. The word was Lazaward. Amelia's blood turned to ice water. The heavy crystal pitcher in her hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her knuckles were white. Lazaward. The inscription was from 9 BC. The word Lazaward was the Persian root for lapis lazuli. While the stone itself was known and traded, that specific Persian term did not enter the Aramaic lexicon of the Levant until the Sasanian Empire's influence spread centuries later, around the 3rd or 4th century AD. A 1st century Nabatean scribe would have used the native Semitic word shubestu, or perhaps the Egyptian or Sumerian loanword, but never ever Lazaward. It was a 300-year linguistic impossibility, an anachronism as glaring as finding the word computer in a Shakespearean play. How could Dr. Rashid miss it? How could Alistair Finch, with his stellar reputation in 2 years of research, miss it? Amelia looked at them. Rashid was mesmerized by the seal, by the sheer beauty of the object. by the hope of what it represented. And Finch? Finch was no historian. He was a con man, a brilliant one. He had constructed a fortress of thermoluminescence and microscopic analysis, but he had failed to check the most fundamental thing of all, the words. Marcus Thorne was sliding the final signature pages across the table. If you'll just sign here and here, Your Excellency, the transfer can be executed and we can toast to this momentous occasion. The Sheikh picked up the Mont Blanc. He unscrewed the cap. The soft click echoed in the room like a gunshot. He was going to sign. He was going to trade $200 million for a lie, a beautiful, worthless lie. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Dubois' warning, you do not exist. Her debts, her precarious visa status tied to this job, her quiet, anonymous life, all of it could vanish. These men weren't just wealthy, they were nuclear. They could erase her. The nib of the pen hovered over the paper. She saw her father's face, not the broken man at the end, but the vibrant scholar in his dusty study, his eyes alight with passion. To know the truth and let a lie stand, Amy, he had told her, is to become a part of that lie. The pen tip touched the paper. Don't, Amelia whispered. A tiny, choked sound. No one heard. Marcus Thorne smiled, his teeth a predatory slash of white. A new dawn for House Al-Hamad, Sheikh. The terror in Amelia's chest was suddenly, shockingly, burned away by a cold, pure rage. A rage at the arrogance of the deception, the disrespect to the history they were defiling, the insult to her father's memory. She placed the water pitcher on the service cart. The clink of crystal on silver was a small, sharp crack in the cathedral of silence. Every head at the table snapped towards her. The wallpaper had just spoken. The quiet that followed was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering the room. 6 pairs of the world's most powerful eyes were fixed on the waitress, a nobody who had dared to intrude upon their reality. Amelia's face was ashen, but her eyes, for the first time that night, were blazing with a fire that seemed to scorch the air. Marcus Thorne was the first to recover. His smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of incandescent fury. What is the meaning of this? Get her out of here. Now. Mr. Dubois, who had been hovering anxiously in the corridor, must have sensed the shift. He scurried in, his face the color of spoiled milk. Miss Vance, what are you doing? My sincerest apologies, Mr. Thorne, Your Excellency. 1,000 apologies. She will be removed immediately. Wait! The Sheikh's voice was not loud, but it cleaved through Dubois' frantic babbling. Tariq al-Hamad had not moved. The pen was still in his hand, a millimeter from the page. He was looking at Amelia, not with anger, but with a sharp, analytical curiosity. As if she were a complex text he was suddenly forced to decipher. Amelia felt her entire fragile life teetering on the edge of a precipice. The cramped apartment, the crushing debt, the long, lonely subway rides home. It was all about to be swept away. She took a single step forward, away from the shadows of the wall and into the unforgiving light of the central chandelier. Her hands were clasped so tightly at her waist they ached. Do not, she said, her voice trembling but clear and steady. Sign that contract. Thorne leaped to his feet. This is an absolute outrage. Dubois, call security. I want this vagrant arrested for trespassing. David, the Sheikh's head of security, was already moving, his hand touching his earpiece. He was by Amelia's side in 2 silent, menacing strides. Ma'am, you need to come with me. Now. Stop! The Sheikh held up his left hand. It was a simple, almost lazy gesture, but it had the force of a physical wall. David froze. Dubois stopped breathing. Thorne, mid-rant, snapped his mouth shut. Slowly, deliberately, the Sheikh screwed the cap back onto his pen and placed it on the table. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling beneath his chin. The $200 million deal was officially on ice, because the wallpaper had spoken. Miss Vance, is it? The Sheikh asked. His English was flawless, with the clipped precision of an education at Sandhurst. Yes, sir. You have, he glanced at his lawyer, Ben Carter, precisely 10 seconds to articulate why I should not have you ejected from this building and very likely this country. Why should I not sign? The room held its collective breath. Dr. Finch was staring at Amelia with a look of pure, venomous disbelief. Thorne looked as though he was seconds from a coronary event. Amelia looked past them all, her gaze locking directly with the Sheikh's. She had to make him understand. The language of her servitude, English, was insufficient. She needed the language of her father, the language of truth. She took a breath, and in that instant, her entire posture changed. The subservient, invisible waitress vanished. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and the voice that emerged was not the timid murmur of Miss Vance. It was the clear, academic Arabic of Amman, a dialect rich with the cadence of scholarship. لا تعتقد بكلمة منهم يا صاحب السمو هذا الحجار هو تزوير. Do not believe a word of it, Your Excellency. This stone, it is a fake. The effect was like a lightning strike. The Sheikh's eyes widened in astonishment. Dr. Rashid, his own expert, let out a strangled gasp, his jeweler's loop falling from his numb fingers to the thick carpet with a soft thud. Ben Carter looked utterly baffled, understanding only the sudden, seismic shift in power. Thorne and Finch, who clearly didn't speak a word of Arabic, were left sputtering in confusion. What? What did she say? Thorne demanded, his face turning a blotchy red. What is this nonsense? The Sheikh ignored him completely. He responded to Amelia in the same formal, classical Arabic. You speak the language of the scholars? Yes, Your Excellency, Amelia replied, her voice gaining strength. I was raised in it. Then speak, the Sheikh commanded, his voice a low, urgent hum. What is wrong? Amelia's gaze fell upon the sunstone, the object of so much awe and money, and in that same flawless, academic Arabic, she delivered the coup de grace. The entire inscription is a forgery. The object is worthless. Pandemonium erupted. Even before the Sheikh could process her words, Marcus Thorne heard the one globally understood syllable in her explanation. Fake? A fake? He roared, his polished facade cracking to reveal the brutish thug beneath. How dare she? How dare this servant? Your Excellency, this is a calculated insult, a corporate sabotage. I am the president of Thorne Antiquities. That, he stabbed a trembling finger at Finch, is Dr. Alistair Finch from Columbia University. We have provided thermoluminescent dating, microscopic analysis, a full chain of custody. Dr. Finch, recovering his composure, rose stiffly. She's clearly deranged, he said, his voice clipped and cold. A disgruntled employee. Perhaps she's attempting some kind of bizarre shakedown, Sheikh. I strongly advise you to have her committed, not just arrested. This is a $200 million transaction, Thorne was bellowing now, his voice echoing in the silent penthouse. I will not have it jeopardized by some girl in an apron. David, get her out. Dubois, she is fired. Do you hear me? Fired. I am not fired, Amelia said, her voice quiet but imbued with an authority that sliced through Thorne's hysteria. She turned her back on him, addressing only the Sheikh. Sir, please, she said in Arabic, switching seamlessly. Ask your own expert. Ask Dr. Rashid. Ask him to read the third line of the inscription, the description of the central disk. Ask him about the word for the blue stone. The Sheikh's gaze shifted to his advisor. Dr. Rashid was pale, his hands trembling as he fumbled to retrieve his loop. He was profoundly humiliated. A waitress was publicly schooling him in his own field, in his own tongue. Dr. Rashid, the Sheikh prompted, his voice gentle but laced with an unmistakable command. Shamed and furious, Dr. Rashid bent over the sandstone tablet. He located the line. His lips moved, forming the ancient words. He read it again, and then every drop of blood drained from his face. He looked up, not at his employer, but at Amelia. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated shock. What is it, man? The Sheikh snapped. Dr. Rashid looked at the Sheikh, his throat working. My God, he whispered in Arabic. The word used here for lapis lazuli. It is lazaward. The Sheikh stared at him, waiting. Your Excellency, Dr. Rashid stammered, his academic world crumbling around him. Lazaward, it is Persian, a Sasanian-era loanword. It would not have been used in Nabatean Aramaic for another 300 years. It is, it is an anachronism by 3 centuries. The silence that fell was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind whipping against the windows. Marcus Thorne and Alistair Finch, understanding none of the Arabic exchange, were momentarily baffled by the sudden, tomb-like quiet. "Well?" Thorne demanded impatiently. "What's the holdup?" The Sheikh turned his head with chilling slowness to face Thorne. His eyes were no longer curious. They were fragments of polished jet. "Mr. Thorne," the Sheikh said, his English lethally soft, "it appears you have a great deal to explain." The dynamic of the room inverted in a nanosecond. The predators had become the prey. I don't understand," Thorne stammered, his bravado instantly deflating. "What word? What is he talking about?" Dr. Finch, however, knew. He didn't speak Arabic, but he knew exactly what anachronism meant. His face, which had been a mask of academic hauteur, was now a carefully blank canvas of damage control. "It seems," the Sheikh said, his voice dangerously serene, "that my waitress possesses a more thorough understanding of first-century linguistics than your esteemed and highly compensated expert." He gestured to Amelia. "Miss Vance, please, approach the table." Amelia stepped forward. David, the security guard, moved with her, his posture no longer that of an enforcer, but a protector. "This is absurd," Thorne blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Finch finally found his tongue. A single word. It's a scribal anomaly. A later addition, perhaps. It hardly invalidates the thermoluminescence, the tool markings, the seal." "Does it not?" Amelia said, her voice now completely steady. The fear had been incinerated by the rightness of her cause. This was her turf. This was her father's world. "Dr. Finch," she said, her English as crisp and precise as her Arabic, "your TL dating is for the piece of sandstone. An ancient piece of sandstone, I have no doubt. You can buy them from unscrupulous dealers all over the Middle East, but it doesn't date the carving." I beg your pardon," Finch sniffed, deeply offended. "We conducted a thorough microscopic analysis. I told you, the tool markings are consistent." "They are too consistent," Amelia countered. "They show no variation in pressure or angle, no sign of fatigue, no character. They were made by someone copying a template, not by a craftsman creating an original work. It's the difference between a signature and a rubber stamp. And that brings me to your biggest mistake, even bigger than the anachronism." She looked at the Sheikh. "May I?" she asked, gesturing towards the white gloves Dr. Rashid had been wearing. The Sheikh nodded. "Please." Amelia slid her hands into the cotton gloves. They fit perfectly. She carefully turned the tablet, angling it to catch the light from the chandelier. "Your biggest mistake, Dr. Finch, was the inscription's content. You called it a textbook example. It is. It's a little too textbook. In fact, it's an almost word-for-word copy of 3 different dedicatory inscriptions found at Hegra in the 1960s, pieced together. The fragments were published in a monograph by Dr. Robert Vance in 1998. She looked directly at the stunned academic. "You didn't hire a historian to create your forgery. You hired a plagiarist." Dr. Finch was the color of chalk. Amelia had just named her own father. "And finally," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "the man you hired to do the carving, he was talented, but he made one small artistic flourish that gave him away." She pointed with a gloved finger. "Do you see it, Dr. Rashid? The tail of the letter nun in the final word. It has a slight upward curve. That flourish, it wasn't a Nabatean characteristic. It was the personal signature of a 20th century master forger named Georgis Haddad. He was notorious for it. He died in a prison in Aleppo in 2005. You didn't just use an old stone, Dr. Finch. You used an old forgery and tried to pass it off as new." Dr. Rashid simply stared, his face a battleground of awe and utter shame. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I see it now. How could I have been so blind?" "You were looking at the seal," Amelia said, not unkindly. "You saw what you desperately wanted to see." This is all slanderous conjecture," Finch hissed, but his eyes darted toward the door. "No," said Ben Carter, the Sheikh's lawyer, who had been furiously typing on his phone. He looked up, his face grim. She's not. I've just been in touch with a contact at Columbia. Dr. Finch isn't just a professor. He's a professor with over $2 million in gambling debts owed to a casino in Macau. He's been under investigation by the university's ethics committee for months for selling authenticated artifacts from the university's own collection. The room imploded. Marcus Thorne didn't hesitate. He grabbed the Pelican case, slammed the sunstone inside, and made a desperate lunge for the main door. This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He never made it. David moved with the fluid, brutal efficiency of a trained predator. Thorne met the solid oak door, not with his hand, but with his face, propelled by a vicious armbar that spun him around and slammed him to the floor. He went down in a heap of shattered arrogance and exquisitely tailored wool. A second security agent, who had been stationed in the hall, was in the room instantly, securing Thorne's hands behind his back with a pair of zip ties. Dr. Finch did not run. He simply deflated, sinking into his chair like a punctured balloon, his face a crumpled mask of ruin. He was finished. "Get him up," the Sheikh commanded. David hauled Thorne to his feet. A trickle of blood ran from his nose, a grotesque crimson smear on his starched white shirt. You can't do this," Thorne spat, a mixture of blood and saliva flecking his lips. "This is a civil matter. You can't detain me." "I am not detaining you, Mr. Thorne," the Sheikh said, rising to his full height. "I am a guest in your country. My security is merely preventing you from absconding before the New York Police Department arrives. Ben, please make the call. Attempted grand larceny, fraud to the value of $200 million. I suspect the district attorney's office will be quite interested." Thorne's eyes widened with pure, unadulterated terror. Mr. Dubois, the manager who had been trying to merge with the wallpaper by the service cart, looked as if he might actually faint. He was witnessing an international incident unfold next to the dessert trolley. The Sheikh walked slowly around the table. He looked at Amelia, who was still standing there, her hands in the white cotton gloves, her heart finally beginning to slow from its frantic, adrenaline-fueled pace. He looked at her, then at the forged tablet in its case, then back at her. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice soft again, filled with a profound and unnerving curiosity. "In God's name, who are you?" The penthouse, now purged of the villains and the immediate threat, felt impossibly vast. Marcus Thorne and a catatonic Dr. Finch were being held in a separate study by the Sheikh's security, awaiting the arrival of the NYPD's major case squad. Mr. Dubois had been dismissed with a glass of brandy and a stern, non-negotiable directive to ensure the hotel's absolute discretion. It was just Amelia, the Sheikh, his lawyer Ben Carter, and a profoundly humbled Dr. Rashid. The adrenaline had drained away, leaving Amelia with a bone-deep tremor. She was still a waitress in a uniform. Habit took over. Her hands moved to start clearing the used water glasses from the table. "Miss Vance," the Sheikh said gently, "please, stop." Amelia froze, her hand hovering over a glass. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the plush chair Marcus Thorne had so recently and violently vacated. "Sir, I can't. I'm on duty." "You are no longer on duty," the Sheikh stated, not as a dismissal, but as a simple declaration of a new reality. "You are my guest. Please sit." Slowly, awkwardly, Amelia sank into the chair. It felt like sitting on a cloud. She was still wearing the white gloves. The Sheikh poured 2 glasses of water himself, the ice clinking in the silent room, and slid one across the polished mahogany towards her. "Drink." Amelia drank. The cold water shocked her back into her own body. "Now," the Sheikh said, leaning forward, his dark eyes intense. "Again, who are you?" Amelia looked at the table, at the remnants of a $200 million lie. She looked at Dr. Rashid, who was watching her with an expression of deep shame and even deeper admiration. The time for hiding, for being a ghost, was over. "My name is Amelia Vance. My father was Dr. Robert Vance." Dr. Rashid gasped audibly. "Robert Vance? The man who wrote the Nabatean Hand? The expert on the Hegra inscriptions? That Robert Vance?" "Yes," Amelia whispered. "But he was..." "Disgraced," Rashid said. his voice full of a scholar's remembered pain. The scandal over the tomb of the scribe, it ruined him. The evidence was planted, Amelia said, a flare of the old bitter anger rising in her, by the same rival who published the initial report. My father was close to proving it when he fell ill. He passed away 5 years ago, Rashid murmured. A great loss. We all thought his work died with him. Yes, Amelia said, a single hot tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. It was a long illness. My mother followed him 2 years later. We had moved to New York for their treatment. The Sheikh's expression softened with understanding. You are Robert Vance's daughter. It was not a question. It was the solution to an impossible equation. It explained the flawless Arabic learned from her Jordanian mother. It explained the encyclopedic knowledge of a dead forger's signature flourish. It explained the eye that saw what his own paid expert had missed. He did not just teach you, the Sheikh surmised. He trained you. I grew up in his dig sites and his study, Amelia said, her voice finding its footing. I was his research assistant from the time I could hold a brush. After he died and then my mother, there were debts. Medical bills like you wouldn't believe. The academic world. They didn't want the daughter of a disgraced scholar. And frankly, she looked down at her simple black uniform. I didn't want to be Robert Vance's daughter anymore. It hurt too much. I just wanted to be anonymous. She gave a small, mirthless smile. So I came here. The pay is good, and the view is better. And I knew no one from my old life would ever eat at a place where I could afford to work. The silence in the room was now one of profound, empathetic respect. Anonymity, the Sheikh murmured, is a luxury for the unremarkable, Miss Vance. For those like you, born to see what others cannot, it is a cage. He was quiet for a long moment, processing the sheer improbable sequence of events. Then his face grew hard again, the businessman and strategist reasserting control. He looked at his lawyer. Ben, the Sheikh said, there is something wrong here. Sir? This scam. It was simultaneously brilliant and idiotic. The Lazarward anachronism, the plagiarized text, Haddad's flourish. These are amateur mistakes, fatal, foolish errors. Thorne and Finch are not amateurs. They built a $200 million lie with perfect scientific cover and then made a series of freshman-level historical blunders. Why? A new kind of cold, different from before, settled over Amelia. You're right, it's too obvious, almost like they didn't care if it was eventually discovered. Precisely, the Sheikh said, his eyes narrowing. What if they didn't care if the tablet was ultimately proven a fake, so long as it was authenticated and purchased by me? Tonight? What if the tablet itself was never the real prize? Ben Carter, the lawyer, suddenly looked as if he'd been punched. Oh, God, the contract. He lunged for the stack of documents the Sheikh had almost signed. He flipped past the pages detailing payment schedules and wire transfers, diving deep into the appendices, the dense forest of boilerplate legal clauses that no one ever reads. Page 57, Ben muttered, his finger tracing a line of microscopic text. Clause 1138, subsection B. Dispute resolution and sovereign claim arbitration. He read the dense legalese, his face growing paler with each word. Your Excellency, he said, his voice strained, this is diabolical. Explain, the Sheikh commanded. This clause, it states that by executing this contract, you, on behalf of your sovereign fund and your family, agree that any and all historical claims related to the Al-Rimal al-Baida territories become subject to a binding, final arbitration by an independent panel, a panel named in this contract. And who is on this panel? The Sheikh asked, his voice deadly calm. 3 entities, Ben said, reading them off. 2 are anonymous LLCs registered in the British Virgin Islands. The third, I recognize the name. It's a holding company that is a known subsidiary of a rival state-owned enterprise, the same one that has been funding the opposition to your claim for years. The room became a vacuum. They weren't selling you a key, Ben stammered. They were laying a trap. Go on, the Sheikh urged. By signing, you would have triggered an arbitration you could never win. They would have let the sale go through. Then a week later, they might have even discovered the forgery themselves. But it wouldn't matter. The arbitration clause would be locked in, and in that hearing they would argue that since your primary historical evidence, the Sunstone, was a fraud, your entire ancestral claim was fraudulent by extension. The panel, their panel, would rule against you. Your family's claim to the territories would be extinguished. Forever. Amelia felt sick to her stomach. So the 200 million? It was just the bait. The Sheikh finished the thought, his eyes like black holes. It was the price of admission, a $200 million fee to forfeit a territory with proven rare earth mineral deposits worth, conservatively, $20 billion. The scam wasn't the tablet. The scam was the contract. They weren't just forging history, Amelia whispered in horror. They were forging a legal reality. Dr. Rashid looked as if he was about to weep. And I nearly applauded them for it. The Sheikh rose and walked to the immense window, staring out at the indifferent lights of the city. He had come to New York to reclaim a piece of his family's honor. He had come perilously close to signing away their entire future. He turned back to the room. He looked at the simple waitress uniform, at the woman who wore it. He looked at the brilliant, grieving, hidden scholar who had just saved him from a multi-billion-dollar catastrophe. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice resonating with newfound purpose, "your days of being invisible are over." The arrival of the NYPD detectives was a quiet, almost anticlimactic affair. No sirens, no uniformed officers, just three men in sharp suits who looked more like bankers than cops, escorted up in the private elevator. While the Sheikh gave his formal statement in the study, Amelia, Ben, and Dr. Rashid sat in the lounge area, sipping the strong, sweet mint tea Amelia had finally had a chance to prepare. Dr. Rashid couldn't take his eyes off her. "Your father," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "He would have been so proud. I met him once at a symposium in Munich. A mind like a whirlwind, and I failed his legacy tonight. I was so blinded by the beauty of the object, I forgot to read the words." "You were excited," Amelia said, offering a small measure of grace. "That's what they were counting on. Emotion clouds judgment. It's the cornerstone of every great con." "You are wise beyond your years, Miss Vance," he said, bowing his head slightly. When the police had departed, taking Thorne and Finch into the anonymous New York night, a deep quiet settled over the penthouse. It was past midnight. The wind had died down. The Sheikh returned, looking weary but energized. "Ben, Dr. Rashid," he said, "please wait for me in the car. I would like a private word with Miss Vance." The two men nodded and left. David, the head of security, lingered by the door. "It is all right, David. I am quite safe with her," the Sheikh said with the faintest hint of a smile. "Wait for us downstairs." And then they were alone, the billionaire and the waitress, surrounded by the invisible wreckage of a global conspiracy. "They will go to prison," the Sheikh said, more to himself than to her. "But they are merely the delivery boys. Thorne, Finch, they lack the political capital to orchestrate this. Someone else was behind them. The rival enterprise named in the contract, a foreign power that wants the Al-Rimal al-Baida." "A corporation? A country?" Amelia asked. "In today's world, is there a difference?" the Sheikh countered. "That, however, is a problem for my intelligence services. I am now faced with a different problem, a problem of my own making, which you have exposed." Amelia's heart gave a nervous flutter. "Sir, I have a crisis of faith. My experts, my historians, the very systems of trust I have built to protect my family's legacy, they have all failed me. Tonight was not just about money, it was about heritage. And it was all nearly undone by a clever lie and a piece of old rock." He paused, his gaze locking onto hers. "And then there is you, a woman who can spot a forger's signature from a decade ago. A woman who knows the precise etymology of 3rd century Persian loanwords. A woman who, forgive me, was serving me bread rolls 2 hours ago." He shook his head slowly. "The universe possesses a strange and terrible sense of humor. Sir, I only did what my father taught me." "Precisely," he said, "and that is exactly what I need you to do now. For me." He walked to the grand mahogany table. "For years I have contemplated establishing a new foundation. Tonight has made it an immediate necessity. I am creating the Al-Hamad Institute for Historical Integrity. It will be headquartered in Abu Dhabi, with a research office here in New York. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with conviction. Its mission will be twofold. First, to acquire and preserve legitimate Middle Eastern artifacts, protecting our shared history from looters and charlatans like Finch. We will create the world's most extensive digital archive, funding real, honest scholarship. He took a step closer. And its second mission will be to hunt, to actively seek out forgeries, to expose them in the marketplace, and to dismantle the shadowy networks that sell our history back to us as a collection of lies. Amelia was speechless, her heart pounding a new, unfamiliar rhythm of hope. This institute requires a director, the Sheikh said. I do not need another comfortable academic who can be blinded by prestige. I do not need a bureaucrat. I need someone with a killer's eye for the truth. Someone with Robert Vance's blood in her veins. Someone who is not afraid to speak when the most powerful men in the room are demanding her silence. Amelia looked down at her plain black dress, at the white apron she had removed and folded neatly on a nearby chair. Sir, I'm a waitress. I have a mountain of debt. I'm not the person you think I am. I know exactly who you are, the Sheikh said, his voice firm but kind. You are Amelia Vance. You are the only person in this city who could have saved me tonight. Your debts will be settled. That is a trivial matter. Your future, that is for you to decide. You can return to your small apartment. You can find another job serving coffee to men who will never see you, hiding from your own name. You can continue to be a ghost. He held out his hand. Or you can come and work for me. You can reclaim your father's legacy and your own. You can vindicate his name, not by hiding from it, but by making it a weapon for the truth. He allowed himself another small smile. The salary will be more than sufficient. You will have a research budget that will make the Metropolitan Museum of Art weep with envy. You will answer to no one but me. He was offering her a life she thought had been buried with her parents, a life she had been too broken to even dare to dream of again. You will never have to be invisible again, Amelia, he said softly, unless, of course, you are on an undercover assignment. Amelia looked at his outstretched hand. She thought of her father, of the years in his sunlit study, the scent of old paper and fresh ink. She thought of the gray, anonymous years she had just endured. She was done with ghosts. She wiped her damp palm on the side of her dress. She stood up tall, and for the first time, she met his gaze not as a servant, not as a victim, but as a peer. She placed her hand in his. When do I start? 1 year later, sunlight streamed through the soaring glass atrium of the Al-Hamad Institute's New York headquarters on Fifth Avenue. In the center of the main hall, resting on a simple, elegant pedestal of black granite, was the Petraean Sunstone. A woman stood before it, addressing a rapt group of doctoral candidates. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored gray suit, her hair cut in a stylish bob that framed a face now defined by confidence. Her hazel eyes were bright, missing nothing. The forgery, Amelia Vance said, her voice clear and resonant, was nearly perfect. The sandstone was ancient. The tool markings were expertly mimicked. The scientific analysis was designed to be impenetrable. She gestured to a large, high-resolution screen beside her, displaying magnified images of the inscription. But it was too perfect, and that was its first failure. Authenticity is found in the imperfections. History is messy. The forger, Dr. Finch, was a plagiarist, not a historian. He copied the forms of the letters, but he could not copy their soul. He was so terrified of making a mistake that he created a sterile, lifeless object. She zoomed in on the infamous word. And then there was this, the fatal flaw, the 300-year anachronism. They built a fortress of false science, but they forgot to read the fine print. They prioritized the container over the content. This, she said, tapping the screen, is the foundational principle of this institute. We do not merely analyze. We read. We understand. We immerse ourselves in the history so deeply that we can feel on an instinctual level when a single note is wrong. A young student raised his hand. Director Vance, what happened to the forgers? Amelia smiled, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. Dr. Finch cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He is currently serving 7 years in a federal facility. Mr. Thorne was less cooperative. He'll be in prison for at least 15. Their testimony, however, was invaluable. Did it lead to the people behind them? The student pressed. It did, Amelia said smoothly. Mr. Thorne's financial records led our investigators to the rival enterprise. After a quiet but firm diplomatic intervention, the corporation was restructured, its leadership was replaced, and their claim to the Al-Rimal al-Baida was permanently withdrawn. Last month, they signed a joint venture agreement with Sheikh Al-Hamad's fund to develop the territory's resources. She didn't need to elaborate on the surgical, legal, and financial campaign the Institute had waged, which had left the rival entity with no choice but to capitulate. The Petraean Sunstone, Amelia concluded, is now the cornerstone of our collection on the art of deception. It is the most valuable fake in the world. A $200 million lesson to always read the fine print. The students scribbled notes, their faces alight with inspiration. After the lecture, as she walked towards her office, Dr. Rashid intercepted her, his face glowing with a joy she had never seen on him in the penthouse. He was now her head of acquisitions. Amelia, he said, the courier from Yemen has arrived. The manuscripts you acquired at auction are here. They are waiting in your office. Thank you, Rashid, she said. She entered her office, a large, light-filled space with a spectacular view of Central Park. The room smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee. And sitting in one of her visitors' chairs, sipping a small cup of espresso, was Sheikh Tariq Al-Hamad. Your Excellency, Amelia said, surprised. I wasn't aware you were in New York. I was in the neighborhood, he said, his eyes twinkling. I caught the end of your lecture. The form, but not the soul. Your father's words. He is a constant presence here, Amelia said, touching a framed photograph on her desk. A picture of a smiling Robert Vance at a dig site, his face shaded by a worn fedora. As he should be, the Sheikh said. He stood holding a slim leather portfolio. I bring you a new hunt. We've received intelligence. A private collector in Monaco. He claims to have obtained a set of bronze scrolls, supposedly from the library of the Queen of Sheba. Amelia's eyes lit up with a familiar, predatory gleam. The scrolls of Sheba? Most scholars believe they're a myth. So they say, the Sheikh said, handing her the portfolio. The asking price is astronomical. The seller is paranoid. No photos, no remote analysis. He is demanding a face-to-face authentication by a single anonymous expert. Amelia opened the file, her mind already racing, sifting through centuries of data, linguistic styles, and metallurgical records. Monaco. When? You fly tonight, the Sheikh said. David is waiting. You'll go in as a consultant for a faceless buyer. Quietly, invisibly. Amelia looked up from the file, a slow, confident smile spreading across her face. Invisible, sir. The most effective way to be seen, the Sheikh replied. Take Rashid with you. I think it's time he had a chance to spot the lie first. Yes, Your Excellency, Amelia said. She picked up her briefcase, her heart thrumming not with fear or adrenaline, but with the pure, exhilarating thrill of the chase. She was Amelia Vance, the director. She was Robert Vance's daughter. She was a scholar, a detective, a guardian of truth. She was no longer a ghost in someone else's story. She was the one who hunted them.